The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Now among those who went up to worship at the festival were some Greeks. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and said to him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." Philip went and told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor. Now, my soul is troubled. And what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it is for this reason I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd standing there heard it and said that it was thunder. Others said, "An angel spoke unto him." Jesus answered, "This voice has come for your sake, not for mine. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." He said this to indicate the kind of death he was to die. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our salvation. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. In preparation for this sermon, I talked with some doctors, some friends of mine, about the state of dying in America. And that made for some very interesting conversations, some interesting exchanges. And I've summarized some of that. And I hope that as we talk about this for a moment, you'll see how this actually segues very nicely in today's gospel. And I think, the medical community and those who are most intimately, immediately, and continuously involved with dying see this in a very different way than the general public does. Because the general public is fed a very different line about life. And that line probably is not true. And so because of that, most of the medical people I know, in fact, all the medical people I know, believe that dying for Americans is shaping up to be something of a train wreck, and increasingly so. And I don't know if you're familiar with these figures. I said them last service, and I thought, those can't be right, and I went back and looked at them again, and they are right. So in America today, 1 in 10 people, I guess it's in the world today, 1 in 10 people will die in the ICU unit, intensive care unit. In America, 1 in 5 of us will die in the ICU. And in Miami, 1 in 3 will actually die in an ICU. And the significance of that is, that's not where most of us want to die. Now, sometimes that life comes together in an unfortunate sort of way where that is the only choice, the best choice, and people want to do everything they can, and that's right and good. But for the most part, that's going to play itself out in a very different way. And the way that it's sometimes talked about is it's like a freeway. And on this freeway is a traffic jam. And it's all going to the same place. And unless a person thinks carefully about where they're going and makes a concerted effort to get off this freeway, to find a side street, an off-ramp to get them off, they're going to end up where they don't want to go. We're going to end up where we don't want to go. You're going to end up where you don't want to go, and that is in the ICU, the intensive care unit. And there are a number of reasons for this. For one, it's very, very expensive. You know that a person can spend in the last year of their life as much as they spent in fact, they tell you to plan on this. Plan on spending as much in the last year of your life as you spent the whole 10 years leading up to that, because of the cost of technologies and machines and medicines and all that sort of stuff that tend to keep people alive. And then the other thing about dying in ICU is that it's very, very stressful for everybody involved. And how they measure this, I don't know, but anybody who's in the situation knows the truth of this. Dying in an ICU is 7 times more stressful than dying at home in somebody's bed. And part of the stress of that, and some of you will know this far better than I in ways that I know are quite challenging, is that what happens in ICU has a way of living on for the rest of people's lives. And that memory has a way of shaping things and continuing to make things painful. And the reason we end up in ICU is that by and large, our technologies, which are sometimes nothing short of miraculous, our advances in machinery, our advances in knowledge, our advances in medication, have cured have at least been able to give short-term fixes for most of the things that killed people in times past. And so what happened? So in the 80s and 90s, we fixed a whole bunch of things for a whole bunch of people that kept them alive longer than would have ever been before. And so we've been able to keep more people alive longer than we have before. But again, contrary to popular opinion, we have not been able to extend the human lifespan one bit. More people are living to great age, more people are living longer, but the actual, not many of us get beyond 100. Nobody gets beyond 120. The end is still firmly set, and nothing we can do has been able to change that. There are people who say that's going to be different, but so far there's nothing evidence that is really the case. And most of the people I know, again, in the medical community, think that is a superstitious belief in science, the way that people once had a superstitious belief in snake oils and elixirs and finding the fountain of youth. So the human lifespan is still set. We've cured the things that we could cure here, and so now what happens when people comes in here is at this day and age, 6 out of 10 of us, and likely more, because again, this is another one of those trends, it's only anticipated to increase, will die simply of frailty. We'll just simply die of frailty. And frailty takes you to the ICU, where machines can keep you alive and technologies will keep you alive until somebody says enough is enough is enough and decides to let death take its course. Because again, as doctors will point out, and some doctors will even apologize for this and say, we never should have used this language that we can save a person's life, because we still cannot save anybody's life. All we can do is delay the inevitable. And part of what's driving this is the loss of immortality, frankly. And so when people have lost faith in there being any world beyond this one, and that's increasingly become the belief, and this has changed within the last 50 years, certainly the last century. When people lost any faith in there being a life beyond this, then they put all their apples into this life. And when you put all your apples into this life, then you've got to get everything out of this life that you possibly can. And so it's not a better world someday, it's more life in this world now. And nobody ever gets all the life out of this life that they want. And if they're still thinking, there's all this stuff that I wanted to have, that I needed to have, then they do not die well. They rage against what's coming. And they're still grasping for that little piece of life that they didn't get, that they felt that they were due, that they felt was their own. And so all of this becomes a way of saying, is there a better way to die? And I think for most of us, I think we would like there to be. I think most people, when you talk to them and they talk honestly, they want to die at home. And the only way to get off the ICU highway is to come to the point in life where a person can say, you know what, I'd like to live longer, but I've lived a good life, and you know what, if I die now, I'm okay with that. And therefore, and makes it crystal clear, communicates it crystal clear to everybody around them, no exceptional anything. Something happens to me, prop me up on my pillow, let life take its course, and I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Otherwise, it's probably going to be this, and it's okay to feel differently. There'll be different opinions about this in the room. I understand this. The only thing I want to do is facilitate the conversation so people don't unthinkingly or unwantingly or undesirably end up somewhere they don't want to be and put a whole bunch of people in unfortunate circumstances. And so I think the only way for that to happen is for people to find themselves where Jesus is in today's gospel, and that is to make peace with death wherever we are in our lives. And Jesus, in today's gospel, he says, now the hour has come. In John has been talking about this actually since chapter 2. The hour is coming, the hour is coming, the hour is coming. And today it finally arrives. Now the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. How's he going to be glorified? We think of Olympic glory, winning medals, we think of these kind of things. No, for Jesus, his glory is his death. And that's something of a disconnect. How can death be a glory? But when you've lived as well as Jesus, when you made your peace with death early on, realize how much life matters, every moment matters, use them all as well as Jesus did, then when you come to the end, you're ready to go whenever the end comes. He's 33 years old. He is a very young man, even in his own day. He will be taken before his time. In the larger telling of this story, as we pick it up in some of the other Gospels, Jesus actually says to God, and I'm going to put some words in Jesus' mouth, some things that it makes sense to me that he might have thought, but Jesus, he said some of these things, but not all of them. Jesus, he does say to God, he says, God, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. In other words, I assume some of what Jesus is saying, some of what Jesus is thinking is, God, this planet turned out to be a great place to be. I mean, food is fantastic. Hanging out with people, wow. And God, if it's possible, I'd like to hang around here a little bit longer. Something of a surprise to me, but if we can work this out somehow, I really would like to live a little longer. But, and here's the big but God, if it's your will, then let it be done as you say. Because I am at peace with dying. I've done what I needed to do. I've made the difference I've needed to make. I've worked hard. I've suffered long. Frankly, I'm ready to rest. So if this is the time, dear Lord, I'm willing to be welcomed into your arms and look forward to seeing you. And it's enough. And he's ready to go. And Jesus will go on from that and then talk about a grain of wheat falling in the ground. And unless it dies, it only remains this tiny little thing. This tiny little thing. But if it will go into the ground, if it will die, then it comes up something far more glorious. And what's Jesus talking about but anticipating death ahead of time so that our lives don't say tiny little things. But when we make our peace with death, allow ourselves in some ways to die to certain things, and something more beautiful can be born. Jesus is at peace with death, and he says, my followers must learn to be at peace with death, because otherwise the fear of death, the denial of death is going to drive and shape their living in ways that are going to misshape living. The fear of death prevents a person from ever living well. The denial of death makes people give their one and only lives to things that are incredibly superficial, unimportant, and unnecessary and irrelevant. I mean, get on a soapbox on that. How do people stop going to church? Well, they stop going to church because they stop believing in another life. And you stop believing in another life, you stop forgetting about what's really important. And then you think that the most unimportant things in the world are important. But there'll be a rude awakening. And so how do we avoid that rude awakening? And again, I've seen lots of people die. I know I've seen hundreds of people die. It's quite possible. At this point, I've seen thousands of people die. And I've talked with lots. And so not everybody dies a good death. Plain and simple. Not everybody dies a good death. A lot of people do not. Those that do, how do they die a good death? I tell you just real quickly, I think 3 things. First of all, when people face death, they need to know that they are forgiven and that they have forgiven the people they need to forgive. And if people, and secular people, they might not talk about sin, but they will talk about regret, and they'll talk about it in very religious terms. For religious people, they understand the concept of sin. I understand sin real well. I think you might too. And if we come to the end of our life and we know that there's sins we haven't attended to, if there's secrets, if there's whatever it may be, those become terrifying things. And a person cannot pass from death into life without this sense of terror, because there's something hanging over their head. And that, I tell you what, that's a hard thing to see. If there's somebody that a person's still furious with, they can't let go of this life because they still want that person to get what's coming to them. And that's a heartbreaking thing to see. And so periodically what we just need to do from time to time, and I would suggest you and we need to do this at least once a year, and we really need to do this, is we just need to sit down and say, are there people I might have offended? And I just need to, and if there are, if I think, boy, Mr. Wilson, are we good? Good, I'm glad. Because I was thinking, and this isn't true, I'm making this up, but I was thinking there was that day at the end of church, and you wanted to talk to me, and I was so busy, and I didn't have the time, and I'm afraid that you might be resenting that, and if there's something I can do to make that up, it's important to me that we have a good relationship, and so very gracefully says, yes, we're good, thank God, I'm glad to hear that. But maybe he says, actually, no, that day really hurt me. I don't ask for much for you, and that day you didn't have the time for me. And I want to be able to attend to that, because when people are dying, it's amazing the little things that come to a person. While I'm laying on my deathbed, and again, you'd be surprised at the stuff that seems so trivial, but it comes back, and I think, oh, that day at the end of the church with Mr. Wilson. And then that scares me, because I know I haven't done what I need to do, and is that going to mean that there's something ill waiting for me? So if I can take care of these things now, the people that I have, keep short lists of the people that I might have offended, just go up and say, are we good? That's the line, are we good? They'll probably say, yeah, we're good. But if they don't, take care of it. And then, are the people you need to forgive, or the people I need to forgive? Make the list. Come to a year, boy. I'm still carrying a grudge from that one. I didn't think I was a grudgeful person, but if the truth is, I'm still harboring a little resentment here. Let it go. Let it go. So that's the first one. People need to forgive and be forgiven. And if people aren't actively involved in some sort of process, that will get in the way of their dying well. That is, frankly, one of the beauties of confessing sins. Old, ancient practice. For thousands and thousands of years, people recognized its value, and we cast it off in a moment. And we haven't done ourselves any favors. Next one is people want to know that they'll be remembered. They want to know that their lives mattered to somebody. A quick story on this that I think illustrates this very well. As far as I know, this is a true story. This was told to me by somebody that as a personal experience. Sometimes you don't really know, but I think this is a true story. And he said that he was in the city, and he was at a stoplight. A person who was begging came up, knocked on his window, rolled the window down, hoping the light would change. But there was enough time for the person to say, "Can you give me something?" And he pulled out a $5 bill, gave the person $5. And the person says, "Well, thank you for that, but that's not really what I wanted. Do you have something else for me?" And now the guy's thinking that this guy's probably a little crazy. He really wants the life to change. And he looks at him and says, "I don't have anything else." And the guy looks at him, and he's growing a little bit more desperate. And he says, "Well, I'm Howard." And the friend, without thinking, says, "Well, I'm Mark." And they shake hands, the light changes, and he says, "Okay, bye." And he thinks that's going to be the end of it. And about 2 weeks later, he's at the same place, and he saw a big crowd of people in an ambulance. And you know how these situations are. He just sort of had this intuition, felt like he needed to stop. Pulled over, stops. They're putting a man in the ambulance. He sees the person's face, and he recognizes it's Howard. And the attendant or a police officer is right there. So anybody know who this man is? Nobody does. He puts up his hand. He says, "Well, I don't know anything about him. I just know his name is Howard." They said, "Good. Well, at least we can put something on." And he's unconscious, and it's clear that the sheet isn't going to be below his face much longer. And the police officers, and it's it's pretty clear that this is happening. And so the police officer says, "This was what this man had. Will you take it?" And the guy says, "Well, sure. It's just a little box." And his first inclination is throw the box away, but then he thinks, some of these people are millionaires, so maybe this is going to be full of $100 bills. So he opens the box, and of course it's just trash. And he goes to throw it away, but he thinks, well, I should probably afford this man some dignity. He looks through it. Again, everything is sort of meaningless till it gets to the end. There's a file, and it's just on the top. It says "Friend." He opens the file, and there's a piece of paper. And on that paper is one name: Mark. To be able to pass peacefully, we just need to know that the one person knows our name. That we matter to one person. That we have one friend in the world. And it does not matter what else you accomplish in your life. You can make more money than God. You can rise higher than the highest mountain ever rose. You can have all kinds of degrees. If you don't have good people around you when you die, it will be a terrifying experience. And if your life is a series of broken relationships, and unfortunately I see that, people who do die alone because their life is a series of broken relationships, that will not go well. And if a person's life is a series of broken relationships, what's the common denominator? Yeah, you, me. So don't put the blame out where the blame isn't. Deal with it. And this is the whole gospel. This is everything Jesus taught. This is all of it in a nutshell. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. Single most important thing, the only important thing, is the quality of our relationships. Get caught up in anything else, frankly, it ain't going to go well. And then the last one is simply that we want to know that our lives are meaningful. And there are a couple things that work against this. I mean, and one of them, again, is this idea that there is no other life. And so we've got to get all our living done now. And there's this incredible pressure to get more life out of life. And unfortunately, there's only so much life anybody can get out of life because we're limited beings. And people start to fantasize these imagined lives. It makes our own lives bearable. We see all these people living so well, and we think we got to live like that. And we got to live like that right now, or we're missing out. We're missing it. And it places all this pressure on us right here and now. And like I said, we start to fantasize these lives, these unlived lives, and which we get the pleasures that we see everybody else having that we don't have. And those lives are what get us through our current lives. And we keep thinking we got to somehow make our lives more like those lives. We've got to take those things out of our unlived lives, those things that we always want to do that we see other people doing. And that becomes an obsession. And it does a couple things. It keeps us tied up in unreality when there's a real world right here, and it keeps us focused on ourselves. Whereas in a different age, even just 50 years ago, people would have known that this world was the poorer of the worlds. They would not have expected everything in this world. They wouldn't even particularly expected to have been happy, but they would have done what was right because they knew that's what's important, and they knew that would take them to where they wanted to go in the grand scheme of things. And those people, by every measure we have, are happier than we are now. In our own day and age, man, only shot we get, so I got to make me happy now. And I have this life of what that looks like that's different than the life that I'm living, but I keep trying to live it, and that makes it all about me. And so I give my life to what does not matter. And you look around you right now, and you are surrounded, hopefully not here, by people who give their lives to that which does not matter. In the face of death, and the fact that we have maybe 100 years, what very real difference are you making? What specific way are you leaving this world better than you found it? What will your mark be? If all the person is trying to do is realize this unrealized life where they get more life out of life now, man, it's going to be all about this tiny little pathetic thing. And when a person dies, and that end does come, as it will inevitably come, they say, oh, I wanted to do this. Oh, I wish I'd done this. Oh, I wish I'd made but then it's too late. And here's the other thing I would say, and again, this for me is a recent learning. And this takes us back to the start, takes us back to that frailty piece. That the thing that kills people now is just frailty. It is what's sometimes called the dwindling. We cure all the big stuff we can cure, but at a certain point, just things start to give out, and there's nothing we can do about that. And the aggregate, the bone of those things, people just dwindle away. And so there's windows on life, and that's not a morbid thing. That's a healthy thing because it helps us focus on what's important. And the first time I realized this, and this is one of my life's regrets, and it's hard for me to talk about. The first time I realized this was when, in recent years, I went fishing with my father. And some of you heard this story before. My dad and I had talked about going fishing for years and years and years and years, but for whatever reason, it never happened. Finally, when my dad was 76, we went fishing. I thought we'd walk up and down this stream. We would, we'd have a great day together. But by the time we did that, my dad stood in one place in great pain because his back hurt him so much, bravely enduring the discomfort of the day so he could give me this memory that I wanted. And it was a good day together, but it was the first time I realized how frail my father had become. And how, in many ways, because I had waited so long, I had missed this opportunity. And more than that, I realized that my father's really only 20 years older than I am. And so frailty is coming for me. And here's the other thing all my doctor friends have said, and they all say it, every single one of them. They say, we have not been able to extend youth. We have only been able to extend old age. And this is one of the great lies of our day. And anybody who's involved with this, really involved with this, knows the truth. Anybody who's not is probably railing against it. You sometimes hear 50 is the new 30. It simply is not true. 60 is the new 40. Ask somebody who's 60 and really knows the landscape of their lives and who is honest. You know, I'm still in good shape. I can still do a lot of things, but I simply cannot do the things I could do at 40. And neither can you. And at 60, I have begun to experience, you know, I, who have always seen myself as strong as I can be, who could do anything I ever wanted to do, have begun to suffer the kind of health things that place limits upon me, and I experience my own frailty. It has come much sooner than I expected. So I just want to say to you, you really only do have so much time. And it's really, really important what you do with it. So may we listen to Jesus and not fear our deaths, but make peace with our deaths, doing the things now that will allow us to die well, to die in the loving arms of God, the grace of God, and look forward to that holy rest. Amen.
Please stand as we